Intermediate Algebra Review of Final Assessment Applications. In question 1, it reads, if an object is thrown upward with initial velocity of 48 feet per second, its height after t seconds is given by h equals 48 times t minus 16 t squared. Find the number of seconds before the object hits the ground. So I'm going to take that formula, that 48t minus 16t to the second, and first pull out the greatest common factor. Looking at a 48 and a 16, the greatest common factor between the two is 16 itself. I also see that each term has a t in common, so I'll also divide out a t. So 16 into 48 gives me 3. T into t is going to give me a 1. Well, 3 times 1 still leaves me with just the 3. I'll move on to the next one. I'll copy down the minus sign, and now I'll divide the 16 into the 16, which gives me 1. Then I'll divide the t into the t squared, and this leaves me with a single t. 1 times t is going to just leave me with a t. I'll take each of these now and set them equal to 0 and solve. On the first side, I have a 16t equals 0. Well, when I go to work this one out, 16 divided to the other side, I find that I have t equal to 0. Well, with that answer, we already know it's not going to work, because we're asked to find the number of seconds before the object hits the ground. And this is telling me 0 seconds. So let's move on to the next one. The other one set it equal to 0, so I have a 3 minus a t equals 0. So I'm going to subtract the 3 from both sides. A negative 3 out both sides, so I'm left with a negative t equals a negative 3. Now I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1 to clear the negative off the variable, and I'm left with t equals 3. So the answer here will be 3 seconds. This object will hit the ground after 3 seconds. Moving on to question number 2, it says solve the problem in the instructions. Question number 2 says the height of a triangle is 3 centimeters more than the length of the base. If the area of the triangle is 65 centimeters squared, find the height and length of the base. So we're dealing with a triangle. So we have drawn over here a picture of a triangle. We have its 3 sides, A, B, and C, and then we have a line down the center for the height. If we're looking at the formula for calculating the area of a triangle, the area of a triangle is equal to the height times the base divided by 2. Well, knowing that, we can now plug in some of the information that we have. We were told that the area of the triangle is 65 centimeters, so area equals 65. We're also told in here that the height of the triangle, we kind of scoot back up, is 3 centimeters more than the length of the base. So we know that the height is equal to whatever the base is along the bottom of the triangle, plus 3. So we have h is equal to b plus 3. With that information, we can now start plugging things into the formula a equals h times b over 2. We put in the 65 for the area equals, for the height, that h position, I'm going to plug in b plus 3 times b divided by 2. Now I have a formula with a single variable to solve for. I'm going to distribute this b into the parentheses, so I end up with a b squared plus a 3b over 2. Next, I want to get that 2 out of there. The 2 is dividing, so to get it out, I'm going to multiply it to both sides. So I'm going to multiply this side by a 2. That'll clear the 2. Whatever I do to one side, the equal sign, I do the other, so I'll multiply the other side with the 2 as well. So coming down here, 2 times 65, I get 130 equals a b squared plus a 3b. Now I'm going to take that 130, subtract it to the other side, so I now have the trinomial b squared plus 3b minus 130, and I'm ready to factor. I take my c position, which is a negative 130, I take my b position, which is a positive 3, and I'm looking for a pair of factors when multiplied together create a negative 130, but when summed together create a positive 3. Well, looking here, this ends in a 0, so 13 times 10, that makes 130. If I look at them, I know that they can actually create a 3 through subtraction. I need to look at it and see which one needs the negative so that I create a negative on the 130, but also so that I can create a subtraction problem. I want a positive 3, so I'm going to make sure that the negative goes on the smaller number. So 13 times a negative 10 makes a negative 130. So then 13 plus negative 10 creates a positive 3. Now that I have that, I can set up my problem. I set up my parentheses and I break my variable from the front position apart into two pieces. So I have a b and a b, and then I plug in these terms, so a plus 13 and a minus 10. Now I'm ready to solve this problem. I'm going to set each of these equal to 0, so b plus 13 equals 0, and b minus 10 equals 0. And I'm going to solve. I solved the first one by subtracting the 13 to the other side, leaving me with b equals negative 13. On the other one, I solved the problem by adding the 10 to the other side. So this leaves me with b equals a positive 10. Well, I'm looking at a measurement, so a negative number doesn't make sense. So I'm going to ignore the negative 13 and use the positive value. So my base has to be a 10. And if you remember, looking back at the formulas, our height is going to be 3 more than the base. So I'm going to take 10 plus 3 to find my height, which ends up being 13 centimeters. Don't forget the units. 10 centimeters, 13 centimeters. It's part of the answer. Number 3 says solve. It says Sandy can make a quilt in 11 days and Ava can make a quilt in 8 days. In how many days can they make a quilt working together? Well, let's set these up. We have Sandy. She can make her quilt in 11 days, or we can think of this as a fraction. She can make 1/11 of a quilt per day. Ava can make a quilt in 8 days, or if we look at it per day, she can make 1/8 of a quilt per day. So now we're ready to put these two together. What we want to know is how long it would take Sandy and Ava together to make one quilt, one single quilt. So we want to look at Sandy. So she has 1/11 times x plus Ava at 1/8 x equals one whole quilt. Alright, let's begin to solve this. Before we can combine these two terms, which are alike, they both have an x raised to the single term, we need the lowest common denominator. Alright, and this will allow me to, if I find the lowest common denominator, I can multiply it through on both sides and clear my fractions. So between an 11 and an 8, the lowest common denominator is going to be an 88. So I'm going to distribute an 88 to all three terms. So 88 times 1 is going to get me an 88 over 11. 88 divided by 11 is 8. So I get an 8x. And 88 times a 1 is going to get me an 88 again. 8 will divide into 88 11 times, so I get 11x. And then an 88 times 1 to the right side. Let's combine those like terms. So an 8 plus an 11, I get a 19x equals 88. Now I divide that 19 out on both sides so that I end up with x is equal to an 88 over 19. I can then I look to see if I can reduce the fraction down. I can't reduce it any, but I can turn it into a mixed number. So I divide 14 into 88. It's going to go 4 times with a remainder of 12. And I take that 12 and put it over the original divisor. So I end up with 4 and 12/19 days. Question number 4. Amy can clean the house in 9 hours when she works together with Tom. The job takes 5 hours. How long would it take Tom, working by himself, to clean the house? Amy, again, can clean a house in 9 hours, or 1/9 per day. Tom, we don't know how long it takes him to clean. It's just x hours on his own, so 1 over x per hour. So let's put this into a formula. So we're going to use the same formula that we used in the previous question, but this time we're going to take that 1/9, but we actually know how much time. It's going to be, with the two of them together, it's going to be 5 hours. So we plug the 5 hours in there. Then we have Tom at 1/x times 5 hours, and this equals 1 house. So we're going to distribute these together, so I end up with 1 times a 5, so 5/9, plus a 5 times 1 here for 5/x equals 1. Again, I'm going to look for the lowest common denominator so I can clear out those fractions. So the lowest common denominator between the two would be a 9x. So I'm going to multiply by a 9x. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to multiply this 9 to the 5. I can do that. It makes a 45x divided by 9. 45 divided by 9 leaves me with a 5. Carry down that x. I can do this over here as well. A 9 times 5 gets me a 45. I have the x then right next to that 45, so 45x over x. So the x's will cancel, and I'm left with just 45. On the other side, a 9 times a 1, 9x times a 1, excuse me, makes a 9x. Now I'm ready to start solving. I'll take this 5x and subtract it off this side, and subtract it off the right as well, so that I'm left with 45 equals 4x. Next, I'm going to divide that 4 out on both sides, so that the 4 clears, leaving an x on the right side. 45 divided by 4. When I look at it, 4 will go into 45 11 times with 1 remainder. That remainder of 1 then goes over the original divisor, so it becomes 11 1/4 x. So it takes 11 1/4 hours. Question number 5 has a plane that flies 400 miles with the wind and 320 miles against the wind in the same length of time. If the speed of the wind is 21 miles per hour, what is the speed of the plane in still air? So for this one, we're going to make a table and fill it in. So we have with the wind and against the wind. With the wind, the plane is flying 400 miles, and against the wind, the plane is going to fly 320 miles. We have a rate as well. We know that with the wind, this plane is going to fly x speed plus 21 miles per hour. Against the wind, it's going to fly x speed with that 21 miles per hour working against it, so we're going to make it a subtraction. So we're going to take those miles, we're going to take that rate, and we're going to set them up into a formula. This creates a division. So we have a 400 divided by x plus 21. And then for the against, we have the 320 divided by an x minus 21. Now we can set them up equal to one another, with the wind and against the wind. So we'll set them against one another in the next section. So 400 over x plus 21 equals 320 over x minus 21. And I'm going to cross multiply now. So when I cross multiply, a 400 times an x minus 21, so I get 400 times an x minus 21. On the other side, a 320 times an x plus 21, so a 320 times an x plus 21. I'm going to simplify the problem by distributing my numbers through the parentheses and clearing them. So 400 times x to make 400x, 400 times negative 21 to make a minus 8,400. On the other side, distribute the 320 to the x to make a 320x, then a 320 to the 21 to make 6,720. I'm now going to start moving things across the equal sign. I'm going to move the numbers with the variables first. So I'm going to move this 320x out by subtracting it. Causes it to go down to 0. On the other side, I subtract it from the 400x. Leaves me with an 80x. So I have an 80x minus the 8,400 equals a 0 plus 6,720. Now I'm going to move my constants over here. I'm going to move them out so that I have the term with the variable left on its own. So I'm going to add 8400 to both sides. So now I'm left with my 80x and my 15,120. Last step, get that 80 off the x, so it's multiplying, so divide it out. So divide by 80, divide by 80. Whatever you do to one side, the equal sign, do the other. So I'm left with an x equals 189. So my answer here is 189 miles per hour.